Hello, I'm Michael Slind, Senior Editor at Stanford Social Innovation Review, and I'm here with Angela Glover Blackwell, founder and CEO of PolicyLink. Angela founded PolicyLink in 1989, and since then their organization has emerged as a prominent voice for using public policy to increase access and opportunity for people of color in the United States. So, Angela, let me start with this first question for you, and I made sort of a two-part question. First, tell me, how can public policy, what role can public policy play in advancing social and other kinds of inclusion? And then more particularly, what are you and your colleagues at PolicyLink doing to leverage public policy in that way?
Public policy is essential for creating a fully inclusive society. The society won't just be inclusive on its own, and public policy has always been the thing that translates the values of a nation into what actually happens in that nation. So we need public policy to make sure that people can reach their full potential. Some of that has to do with how we fund education, some of it has to do with how we invest in housing, some of it has to do with basic fairness in the tax code, some of it has to do with how we think about jurisdictions, whether it's a region that begins to think about transportation, or is it only a city that thinks about transportation. The whole region needs to connect everybody to opportunity, both so businesses can flourish and so people can flourish. We understand that that probably needs to be decided at the regional level, but we need for the federal government to put money into transportation so that regions, states, cities can work with the federal government to actually fulfill the federal government's desire to be competitive in the global economy. So public policy allows us to be able to spend our resources and make decisions that are fair and work for the broader society as well as work for the individual.
Tell me a little bit about specifically what you're doing at PolicyLink in that regard.
PolicyLink is a national research and advocacy organization advancing equity by lifting up what works. Lifting up what works is very important to us because we think that every problem you can point to, there's a community someplace that's coming up with a viable solution. We need to find those solutions, shine a bright light on them, understand what's making them work, and get them into public policy. We are particularly concerned about equity, just and fair inclusion, that allows people to reach their full potential. And so we really try to look at who's being left behind, who's not on a track to be able to reach their full potential, and how does that get grouped racially, geographically, and how can we find strategies that are working, lift them up, work with people from community to get that into public policy.
Let me transition to a second question for you then. And here I want to sort of talk a little bit more broadly about the conversation today about inequality and injustice. What, in your view, is the one thing that people often fail to understand about this problem, about, for example, the roots of inequality and injustice?
People do not understand that inequality is not working. I say it has become toxic. There was a time when economists thought that you needed inequality in order for the economy to work. Many economists now understand that while you may need some, it doesn't work when it's toxic and vast. At the moment, we have way too much inequality. And so we now know from a study from the International Monetary Fund that looked at 100 countries and found that for every 10% decrease in inequality, there was a 50% lengthening in the period of growth. Manuel Pastor and Chris Benner did a similar study looking at 100 regions in the United States and found the same thing. Inequality is hurting growth. So we need to be able to address inequality and the problems that make it toxic, or it's gotten to the point where it's hollowing out the middle class, where it is expanding and deepening poverty, and where economic mobility is completely stalled. When inequality is doing that, your country's in trouble. Our country's in trouble because that's exactly what's happening.
Let me turn back to talking about potential solutions, which I know you focus on at PolicyLink. What's the one idea, intervention, or initiative that you've come across that you really think has the potential to advance social inclusion and racial justice?
One opportunity we have right now is that the Housing and Urban Development Department of the federal government is testing a new rule to look at how we are dealing with the provision of affordable housing and encouraging communities to put affordable housing where there is opportunity. So that if we have a community that has good schools and grocery stores and safe streets, let's make some affordable housing available in those communities so low-income people can take advantage of that. But let's also think about communities that are poor needing investments in transportation, needing investments in terms of good schools, so we can begin to turn communities that are not communities of opportunity into communities of opportunity. There's one policy, but I think the policy framework really has to be growing good jobs, building capacity, and removing barriers and expanding opportunity.
Well, thank you, Angela Glover Blackwell, for answering our 3 questions today.
Thank you.